We now go to Chad Hebert, President of the Houma Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce.
Welcome to the Houma Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce's State Senate District 20 Forum. I am Chad Hebert, owner of Safe Work Safety Solutions, Chair of the Chamber's Board of Directors, and tonight's moderator. The purpose of this forum is to help our members and the community become better informed voters so that they can make the best decisions this coming election. The Chamber is dedicated and committed to promoting, educating, and advocating for business prosperity and regional economic growth. Our mission is uniting community and building a stronger Terrebonne. The Chamber has taken every precaution to ensure that no one candidate was shown favoritism or endorsement. Questions were submitted by Chamber members and the general public, and all questions were secured by the Chamber CEO, Ms. Nicole Blanchard, and our Executive Vice Chair of Government Activities Division, Mr. Bill Erosh. No candidate, Chamber member, board member, member of the general public, or myself had access to any of the questions prior to tonight's forum. I'd like to take this time to introduce our panelists tonight. Ms. Monique Crochet, Nicholls State University, Ms. LaDonna Cruz, Stephanie Hebert Insurance Agency, and Mr. Bill Erosh, Watkins, Walker, Erosh, and Hoycheck, Attorney at Law. Thank you for volunteering your time tonight. I'd like to introduce our candidates. Our candidates will have a chance to do a self-introduction following the reading of the rules. To your far left, the audience's far left, Mr. Shane Swan. Seated next to Mr. Swan is Mr. Damon Baldone. Next is Dr. Brenda Babin. Next is Mr. Mike Facey. And immediate to my right is Mr. Truck Gisclair. Candidates, I'll give you 2 minutes following this introduction to introduce yourself prior to the questions. Thank you for being here tonight. Ground rules for candidates for the forum. Each candidate has pulled a number prior to being seated to determine seating order and who will go first in answering the questions. Candidates will be given the same question, and you will have 3 minutes to answer each question asked by the panelists. I will give each candidate, or Mr. Erosh will give each candidate, a signal indicating you have 30 seconds left in your 3 minutes. Once the timer is up, the 3-minute mark, I'll intervene so we can move on to the next candidate or the next question. I'm asking each candidate to respect their opponent and allow them to answer the question without interruption within their 3 minutes. Should you choose to respond or rebut or address anything a previous candidate has said, feel free to do so within your 3 minutes allotted in your next question. If the candidates do not follow the rules, he or she will be given 2 warnings. Following the second warning, a third violation, we will ask that candidate to leave the forum, and the forum will continue with the remaining candidates. At the end of the forum, each candidate will have time for closing comments. Any questions, candidates? Ground rules for our viewing audience. No verbal outbursts or heckling or disrespecting any candidate. No questions will be taken from the audience due to time constraints, and we will not give any warning to any audience member that violates any of the ground rules. He or she will be asked to leave the forum. Candidates, I'd ask that you introduce yourself now. We'll start with Mr. Shane Swan. 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shane Swan, and I got in this race because I believe that the people wanted someone that wasn't a politician. Politicians often play party politics and worry about their donors instead of their people. And so therefore, we're running this campaign on issues and not donors, and we're keeping it simple. We're running on classrooms, roads, and jobs. I believe that if we improve our classrooms and give our children the finest opportunities, not only in college opportunities, but as well as being able to go into the workforce immediately out of high school, that they will not only stay, but we will see an increase in tax dollars in our area. I believe that if we improve our roads, they are deplorable. It is a joke, the roads that we drive on. It's costing our people money every year. They're losing money because we're failing them on our roads. And if we improve them, larger, smoother roads will breathe life into our economy. The businesses will follow. They will come for our talent. They will come for our roads. This is the project that I'm laying out to you, and that if we focus on, I believe that we can build a better Louisiana together. That's why I got in this race, to be the non-politician candidate, to stand for the issues that the regular people are dealing with, and to make sure that we are talking about the issues and not just having a popularity contest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Mr. Damon Baldone.
Good evening. I want to first of all thank the Chamber for inviting us here and having this open forum. Again, my name is Damon Baldone. I'm a lifelong resident of Terrebonne Parish. I'm a 1982 graduate of Vanderbilt Catholic High School. 1986 graduate of Nicholls State University, and a 1992 graduate of Southern University Law Center. I've practiced law for over 26 years in Houma in private practice, doing all areas, representing people as well as businesses. I'm also a real estate broker. I was a teacher. I taught at the junior high level. I taught at Nicholls as an assistant professor for math, as well as at LSU. I taught biology at LSU. And I also have taught at paralegal school and as well as continuing education for lawyers and judges. I was elected state representative 3 times to represent the people of Terrebonne and Lafourche. All 3 times I served honorably. I was appointed by all 3 governors, Governor Foster, Governor Blanco, and Governor Jindal, to serve on the Governor's Advisory Commission for Coastal Restoration. I served on the Lafourche Freshwater Diversion Committee. I served on the Governor's Commission on DWI Task Force. I was also the Public Service Commissioner for 2007 interim when President Trump appointed the Public Service Commissioner to the position for the Gulf. During that tenure, we had the lowest electric rates in the United States. I, by far, I think, have the most qualifications of all candidates. I want to offer my service again because I truly love this area, and I want to make sure that we can continue to fight to get excellent protection for coastal restoration and hurricane protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldone. Dr. Brenda Babin, please take your 2 minutes for your introduction.
Hi, I'd also like to first thank the Chamber for hosting this, and Fletcher and Dr. Christine Strickland for having us here at Fletcher in this beautiful atrium building. As he said, I'm Dr. Brenda LaRue Babin, and I'm running for State Senate District 20. I'm running because I have faith in our people, hope for our future, and I love Louisiana and the Bayou region. I have faith in our people. I served 10 years working at LumCon, studying the coast, and I made coastal science the focus of my PhD studies. And the one thing I learned after studying the coast and making that the focus of my PhD studies is that it's time to quit studying the coast and start doing something about it. And so we have in this parish and in Lafourche Parish taken it upon ourselves to make our levees, and now we have to build those extra lines of defense beyond the levees. I also have hope for our future. I spent 30 years in the classroom and in various levels of education, 17 years at Terrebonne Parish School System, 10 years at LumCon, 5 years at Fletcher Technical Community College teaching computer science. I also taught at Nicholls and LSU. And it's time that we put the soul back into education in our system. It's time we quit testing students so much. It's time we let teachers teach. We hired teachers. We train teachers to be professional educators. And it's time we let teachers teach. I served 8 years on the school board. And after beating my head against a brick wall on the school board, trying to make a difference in the classroom, the one thing I learned, if I want to make a difference in the classroom, I have to do it in the state. I love Louisiana and the Bayou region. So on October 12th, vote Dr. Brenda LaRue Babin, Senate District 20, Babin for the Bayou.
Thank you, Dr. Babin. Mr. Mike Facey, please take 2 minutes and introduce yourself.
I want to thank the Chamber for putting on this event. I want to thank Fletcher for hosting it. And I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Well, I'm going to kind of give you my story. I got married at age 20, been married 39 years, raised 4 children, and now have 11 grandchildren. So that's quite a few reasons why we want to make our area better. I started my company when I was age 20, and at age 20, I was a single-man operation. We now have 500 hard-working Lafourche and Terrebonne Parish people working for us. We've created 500 jobs. So over the tenure of my 40 years from 20 to age 60, I've created a lot of jobs. I've gave a lot of people work over the years. We've trained a lot of people. So what it takes is I'm a hard-working person just like everybody in this audience. I go out and I come up with ideas to make things better. I'm an innovator. I've created 3 patents I have under my belt, making items that make it easier for everyone that's here, okay? I also have characters I developed after the BP incident, being upset with what they were doing to our industry on the television, I created Bernie and Earl. Bernie's a gas flame, Earl's an oil drop. So we've put that coloring book out to over 1 million kids now, teaching them about the petroleum industry. So what I want to do is just let y'all know who I am, what I can do. I can make a difference. Going to Baton Rouge, vote for Mike Fazy, number 58 for District 20. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Facey. Mr. Truck Gisclair, please take your 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank the Chamber and obviously Fletcher for putting this on, and thank the public for showing up. I'm Jerry Truck Gisclair. I'm age 71, born and raised on the Bayou, resident of La Rose, 3 daughters that graduated from Nichols State. My mother graduated from Nichols College, so I'm well vested in our region. I am from Lafourche, but I work in a regional area. I served the last 11 and a half years as your state representative for District 54. I am a registered Democrat, but I have a D behind my name since I was 18. I don't consider myself a left wing. I'm more moderate, I'm more independent, if anything. You can look at my voting record. 25 years, I had a telecommunications service company working onshore, offshore for the major oil companies, for the small companies. I was a blue and white collar worker. Last 25 years, we're entering our 26th year of broadcasting. We've got 3 radio stations, and I'll say they're fairly successful. I've learned what it is to compete against the big companies. I'm a small radio operator, and we are doing whatever we have to do to survive. And we've got good employees. We don't have 500 employees, but the employees we have are dedicated. And one thing that I'm pushing is education, keeping our Cajun culture. I am bilingual. Je parle français et je peux parler avec tout le monde de la région. Bien, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Truck Gisclair. Thank all of you for being here tonight. Let's begin with our first question. Ms. Crochet, your first question will go to Mr. Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert. Mr. Swan, list 3 qualities or qualifications that sets you apart from your opponents.
It's a good question, a fair question. Number 1, I feel like we need someone that's energetic enough to go and debate circles around the other senators on the floor. Every day is a competition to bring dollars home for our way of life, to improve our way of life. And so I feel like I am vigorous enough to go and make sure that those other senators know that our district is not a district to look over. Number 2, I would say that I overcame the failures of the past legislatures, where they failed us in school, where they failed us in infrastructures. I have directly overcome that, and I am standing here today running for state senate to improve, our way of life. And not only that, but give kids something to look forward to. Give kids, I sat in classrooms and they told me that you can be anything, that you can do anything. And so I want the children of our parish to look and see that there's someone that looks like them, that's trying to do something, that's trying to make a difference, even if they're taking on a lot of money in this election. And number 3, I would say, is hard work and perseverance. It's something that I've needed my entire life. I've had to fight most days, sometimes just to get a meal. And so therefore, I feel like I have what it takes to go to Baton Rouge and make sure that we aren't looked over anymore, that we get the dollars that we need for classrooms, infrastructure, and that'll bring jobs to our community.
Thank you. Mr. Baldone, do you need me to repeat the question?
I have, first of all, the 3 qualities of, first of all, that I'm an attorney. I dedicated my life to studying and practicing the law. I've been practicing and studying the law for over 30 years. I have a doctorate degree in understanding the law. You don't have to be an attorney to go to Baton Rouge, but it sure does help. You are arguing with other attorneys and seasoned politicians to make sure that the laws that are passed are equal to everybody and fair to everybody and don't overly burden one sector over another. So that's a huge advantage that I have for my competitors. Second one is legislative experience. The Senate is not a training ground. The Senate is the most important position that Terrebonne Lafourche has to connect to the state. Terrebonne Lafourche will only have 1 senator from its area that live in that area. This will be Senate District 20. So it's not a place where somebody can go and get on-the-job training. Next one is my business experience. Besides being an attorney, I have about 15 other businesses: real estate, service industry, bed and breakfast, television station, oil and gas, offshore boat, and several other ones. So it's a combination of my legal experience, legislative experience, and business experience that will make me the best choice for this job.
Thank you, Mr. Baldone. Dr. Babin, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the first and foremost is the fact that I have a doctorate in coastal science. District 20 of all the Senate districts is the Senate district with the most coastline. It is not the Senate district with the most coastline if you look just a straight line, but if you go around, it curves around, and it is the district with the most coastline. And so for the past 20 years, I've studied the coast. I've monitored the coast as an environmental monitor at LumCon. I studied the coast during my PhD studies. And it's time now that we make decisions about protecting our coast, restoring our coast, and what to do with all of those issues. And with the fisheries industry, those decisions should be based on science and not on politics. It's not on who's going to get the money out of it, but on the science and where the changes need to be made. And that's what I bring to the table, is the science behind that. The other thing is my background in education. I spent 30 years in education. I know what's needed in education, and it's time we have educators in there to help make those decisions about education. The teaching profession is the only profession in Louisiana that does not govern itself. It's governed by elected officials. And so it's time we have educators in there to help with making those decisions and informing the other senators about how those decisions need to be made. The third quality is symbolized in, if you've seen any of my campaign literature, you see the little bee. Well, the bee symbolizes that I am a worker bee. A lot of people try to call me a queen bee, a boss bee, Dr. Bee is my nickname, but it actually symbolizes being a worker bee. I am a worker. A lot of people say that I'm a busy person, and they say when you want something done, you find the busiest person around, and you go to that person, and they'll get it done. And that's the kind of person I am. I'm the kind of person that when something needs to be done, I'm going to go and get it done. And that's why my symbol's a bee. I'm a busy bee, and I'm a worker bee.
Thank you, Dr. Babin. Mr. Facey?
All right. I'm going to start out with, from age 20 to age 40, that's 40 years I've been in the construction business. And I'm probably the most conservative person on this panel. I'm the only one in this group that's created a lot of jobs and know how to create jobs. I'm an innovator with 3 patents under my belt. I'm also an outsider from a career politician, so I know how to negotiate and get things done. That's what I've done all my life. I'm a problem solver. I've been problem solving all my life. That's how I built my business. My business was built on solving people's problems. We have a lot of problems in this state, and that's what I'm here to do, is start solving problems. I am for his levies. I'm the only one licensed, state licensed contractor here in erosion control. I am the only one that has actually built some levees for Terrebonne Parish. I know how to build levees. I can do it with my own 2 hands, and I can teach people how to do it. We got a lot of construction to do. After Katrina, I spent almost a year down in Plaquemines Parish after it was wiped out. I see the devastation that hurricanes can bring to us and what we got to do to fix it and what it takes to stop the devastation. I've been around a long time putting things back together. After Hurricane George in 1998, down in Plaquemines Parish, I rebuilt Pilot Town. I was down there long enough to understand how the river works. Part of our problem with our erosion control is we levied our Mississippi River off in the 1920s. With being levying the Mississippi off, all of that fresh water and silt does not flow down our bayous now. Terrebonne Bayou is just a big ditch. When I was a kid, you could go piroguing in it and catch fish. Every one of our bayous is now turning into just big ditches and drainage ditches. So there's no silt going back down into our coastal zone area, and that's why the saltwater is intrusion and losing all of our wetlands. We must, and I know how to pipeline silt to coastal area and make sure we can save our coast. That's what I'm all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Disclair, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, it's all right.
Okay.
I guess my three qualities are that when I first got elected, I met other state reps, and most of them had been in government before. I never held office in my life. I was a blue and white collar person. I'm a contractor. I am licensed to build levees. I have multiple licenses. I'm in electronics, but I have heavy construction. We've got a company that does construction work. So I know what it takes to build barrier islands. I know what it takes to build the intermediate islands and have that intermediate protection. I know what it takes to build levees. I have to commend the South Lafourche Levee District for what they've done over the years, and Terrebonne Parish for getting a late start, but everybody always assumed Terrebonne Parish was so high, the elevation. But thank God that everyone took the move to get their levee started, and Reggie and Terrebonne Levee District have done a fantastic job over the last 10 years catching up to South Lafourche. Now, South Lafourche began in the 60s with their system. And also, what I bring to the table, one of my other qualities is, for the last 11 and a half years, I went across party lines. I looked at issues. I did not look at a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. I worked with other individuals. I worked with regional delegations, and I worked with state delegations. I was the Rural Caucus vice chair. So I'm working with individuals across from Shreveport to Lake Charles, to Slidell. So I work well with other groups. I hope that answered it.
Thank you. Mr. Baldone, what do you think should be the first priority of the state legislature when the next session begins? And what actions will you take to see that work on that priority is initiated as quickly as possible?
Well, the most important thing we have right now is to make sure they have a stabilized budget and stabilized funding. As you know, for the last several years, we've had deficits. And when we do that, that hurts our bond rating and hurts everything else. It hurts, the instability causes a lot of problems in our higher learning education, our infrastructure projects. So to make sure that we have a stable, fair tax base is probably one of the most important things. Once we have a stabilized budget, that lets us solve all the other problems. It lets us address higher education, lets us address infrastructure, it lets us address health care. So that's the most important thing is a stabilized, predictable financial future for the state of Louisiana.
Thank you. Dr. Babin, do I need to repeat the question for you?
No, that's okay. I think the first thing that the state legislature needs to address is education. The budget has been stabilized over the last couple of years, and we need to adjust some in the budget, but we need to begin right off the bat and begin addressing education. First, starting with prior to, starting school, pre-K, all the way up to higher ed, and finding funding to make sure that everybody is entitled to a good public education and get that corrected.
Thank you. Mr. Facey?
Well, the budget's important, but what's more important to me is jobs. And the jobs, we have to stop the legacy lawsuit. The legacy lawsuit has to be fought 100% to stop our area from going down in the drain. So we must fight that. I'll be a strong advocate to fight against the legacy lawsuit. We have other parishes that are joining up with this legacy lawsuit, which would be devastating for our area. Yeah, the oil field is not the only economy, but without the oil field, we lose a lot of other stuff. Industry takes off, everybody takes off. And I think that's most important, to make sure that legacy lawsuit doesn't get off the ground.
Thank you. Mr. Gisclair?
Yeah, I think we have a couple of issues. We have the 2020 census, and we're going to be looking at redrawing, redistricting the entire state, and that is going to be very, very important. I think we're going to have to take a look at, I went through one 10 years ago, and it was very painful. And I think to get a neutral look at this, we either have to form a local commission so we can decide. We do have to follow population counts, and it is a difficult task, but it's an issue that I haven't heard anyone talk about. And to me, the budget is a big item, but also the redistricting process that's coming up, and it'll be here before we know it.
Thank you. Mr. Swan?
The number one issue that our state faces right now is education. We are failing in education. We are last in the country, and this is a joke because politicians are playing party politics and worrying about their donors. How I would address this: number one, I would advocate for a raise in teacher pay. I would advocate for less standardized testing on our students, and so therefore we could put more of freedom into the hands of teachers, the people who are on the ground fighting the battle for these kids and know how to deal with it. I believe that we need to make sure that we increase teacher pay so that it is competitive in the country. We need to attract the best teachers for our students so that they can have a chance in this country. We're last in opportunity. I mean, I can tell you it's a laundry list of things that we're last in. And some of these people up here have been legislators, and sure, they may have fought, but we're still last. And so I think it's time for a new, fresh, innovative approach, and that's what I'm offering. My number one focus is education, and that's what I'm running on.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Next question will go to Dr. Babin. What are your top 3 infrastructure projects for our Terrebonne-Lafourche region?
The top 3 infrastructure is a lot of infrastructure projects that face the Lafourche and Terrebonne region. One of the top projects that I think we should address, first of all, is the system that the DOT uses in governing the projects. So we have the, in the DOTD, there are 9 different districts centered around the metropolitan areas. And so we're part of New Orleans, so we're often the stepchild of New Orleans. So if we would get a DOT district for ourselves, then that would be a top priority or project that would improve our infrastructure right there. And so that's one of the things I want to look at and get the ball rolling started with. The other is to finish LA1 from, the 4-lane all the way to the Fouchon. That's a high priority. We need to do that. We need to do that for industry, to keep industry rolling in the Fouchon. As soon as the hurricanes pass, that road needs to open to get those people back to work as quickly as possible. The third infrastructure project that I think needs to be addressed is evacuation routes. We are the only metropolitan area around that does not have a major interstate highway running through us. And interstate highways are very conducive to evacuation routes. And so by continuing I-49 and connecting us to the I-10 infrastructure, and those infrastructures will help with evacuation in the event of a hurricane, impending hurricane, and that kind of thing.
Mr. Facey, same question.
Okay, one of the first things I'd like to do is work with both parish presidents to make sure our levee systems are completed to fight hurricane, to keep our hurricane protection going in the direction it's going. It's going in a real good direction right now. We just need to finish that. The next thing is our bridges. Most of our bridges in our area in both parishes have been downgraded, which is messing up industry. The 2 bridges that my facility is on, they both downgraded them, so we cannot even leave the island with heavy equipment. Had to buy a new location just to be able to stay in business. So in that turn, downgrading the bridges has really hurt industry, not only mine, but many others, because a lot of industry in these areas use the bridges that's been downgraded. And then the Highway 1 project has been funded by the state. We need to get the federal government to finish funding it so we can complete that all the way to Fouchon. And then with that, having a highway designed to go to the Mississippi River Bridge in Vacherie from the Highway 90 corridor would drastically change Lafourche Parish and Terrebonne Parish into being able to go directly north. That highway's been in need for years. Nobody's even looking at it, and that would be one of the things I'd want to propose to go in the right direction so everybody could definitely have hurricane evacuation routes. Thank you.
Mr. Gisclair.
Thank you. The completion or installation of the Bubba Dub lock system would be very, very important to the region. The deepening of the channel to the proper authorized level would be one. Port Fourchon, the same thing. We have an LNG plant that's will be a reality in a few years. We've got, I think, authorization to go to 35 to 40 feet, eventually to 50, and that needs to be done. And obviously, House Bill 758 secured $150 million in matching funds, and we're waiting on federal funds to finish the last 8 mile of elevated highway between Golden Meadow and Leeville. Once that is complete, we're looking at a hurricane evacuation route for everyone offshore coming into the port and the people of the town of Grand Isle, which is in the middle of House District 54. And whenever there's a weather event, LA1's over top, people are stuck. And anytime we stop commerce with an overtopped LA1, we're losing tens of millions of dollars per hour at Port Fourchon. So that elevated highway is very, very important. Thank you.
Mr. Swan.
I believe our fight for infrastructure starts with creating a DOTD district for our area. It doesn't make any sense that we don't have this. We have the population for it. We've had the population for it for some time now. And our roads are in a deplorable state. You're going to hear me saying this a lot tonight. We are last in infrastructure, amongst the many things that we are last in. And so that would be the very first thing. We have to work with all administrations on all levels to make sure that we advocate for a DOTD district. And I think that would clear up a lot of the messes that we're dealing with. Number two, we would aim to improve the roadways to Fourchon and the Gulf Coast, because that is where most of our commerce is coming from in terms of the oil field. I work in the oil field myself. I certify crude oil and natural gas, and I have to deal with a lot of logistics to get those samples up from Fourchon. And so I know how that affects commerce with the time that it takes before my samples get to me, so on and so forth. Number three, this is a curveball here, and it goes hand in hand with trying to promote a better lifestyle for Louisiana. We are one of the most obese states in the country, and so I would aim to try to improve more bike lanes, to implement more bike lanes, especially in our downtown area. We need to find funding for that, and I think that that would be a good way to revitalize our downtown area and get a lot of people involved in the community from all walks of life. That's the children all the way up to the retirees. As you may know, we are a community in which retirees we're trying to attract. And so I feel like we need to make sure that our infrastructure can support a way of lifestyle for people that doesn't necessarily involve them using their car all the time. They can go downtown, do some shopping, and communicate with other people that are down there enjoying their lives.
Mr. Baldone.
Thank you. Hurricane protection is high priority, obviously. When I was elected in 2001, Terrebonne had really no defined hurricane protection levee system. I was glad that that's one of my legacies, that since we've obtained funding, we have a good almost first layer of defense in the hurricane protection with the Morgans of the Gulf, but we have a long ways to go. I want to complete the hurricane protection, enhance the hurricane protection in Lafourche as well. For coastal restoration, that's high priority as well. Obviously, the more coastal restoration we do, it helps our seafood industry. It also protects us from hurricane. Every 2.3 miles of marshland that's out there knocks a storm surge by 1 foot. So we need to protect the levees now that we're investing so much money in. I was proud to say that I was one of the co-authors for the Go Mesa funds. In 2005, before Go Mesa money became available, Senator Dupre and I pushed through a bill in the legislature that dedicated all the money from the offshore, outer continental shelf that we get in the future to hurricane protection and coastal restoration. Nobody's seen it coming, but in 2007, it was passed in Congress, and now we're starting to get the proceeds from that started in 2017. So I had the ability to look in the future to see what we need to solve our coastal restoration hurricane protection problems. Everybody can identify the problems, but you have to identify how you're going to solve the problems, and that's typically a funding source. And I was able to, for both coastal restoration and hurricane protection, secure a stabilized funding source to meet those needs. The next thing, obviously, is LA1 and LA1, as well as bridges and the road infrastructure. By having a better infrastructure to get to the ports, especially with the LNG facility coming soon, that will incentivize and help the private sector create the jobs. Government's position is not to create jobs, it's to enhance the private sector's ability to make these jobs. We do that by having good infrastructure projects, good ports, good roads, good bridges. So those are the top three.
Thank you, Mr. Baldone. Mr. Facey, I'm sorry, I'll get it. This next one's for you, and then we'll follow through. Just as the case at the federal level, state legislators seem to be more entrenched in their party line than collaborating with each other towards solutions that work for our entire state. What actions will you take to facilitate more effective collaboration?
I'm committed to be a good listener. So being a good listener, you always figure out where the problem's at, being a problem solver. So what I'll do is work hard to get people together, negotiate things, and make sure we can get things going back in the right track. Over the years of being in business, negotiating jobs, projects, designing, and doing all those sort of things, you have to have the ability to be able to compromise. And I very, very much so know how to do that. And being able to compromise, you get things done. Part of the problem, everybody's always arguing over and not giving any a little bit. Sometimes you got to just get in there and negotiate and maybe convince. I'm a pretty good convincer to convince people which way to go and how to do things and why my idea is better. Because my ideas have gone a long way in life. And I've created a lot of jobs by doing that. And I just think that I'll be a good negotiator up there to make everything happen and get things going in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Facey. Mr. Gisclair, would you like me to repeat, or?
No,
Okay.
that's all right. A couple of years ago, we passed a sales tax when we inherited a $2 billion deficit from Governor Jindal's administration. We had a Republican-controlled House, but yet there was a lot of division. And we passed a tax that lasted 27 months, and it was a fiscal cliff that we were facing. And it was party division. And I was one of the people, 8 Democrats got together with 8 Republicans. We weren't the leaders. We took the far left and the far right. We got them out of the picture. The 16 of us got together, Republicans and Democrats working together, and we came up with a solution. The sales, the 2 cent extra sales tax, 2.5 cent, I'm sorry, went away. We put the 0.47 cent sales tax, and it's I believe a 5-year tax. And that's going to buy us enough time to get our act together if we're going to rewrite our tax codes like we were going to do. There was a lot of division. Didn't want the governor to look good in an election year. We missed an opportunity. And I think that the moves that we made, getting the Republicans and Democrats together, I think we saved the state from another fiscal crash.
Thank you, Mr. Gisclair. Mr. Swan?
Repeat the question, please.
Sure, I was going to ask you. Let me put my glasses on. Just as is the case at the federal level, state legislators seem to be more entrenched in their party line than in collaborating with each other towards solutions that work for our entire state. What actions will you take to facilitate more effective collaboration?
Okay, so number one, I want to point out that part of the reason that they're so entrenched in their parties is because of their donors. They're taking money from people who have political interests, and those people will stop giving them money if they do not vote the way that they are asking. And so therefore, to make sure that I eliminate no conflicts of interest, I'm not taking any money from anybody. Nobody's buying me. Nobody can buy me. I'm going to vote for the people 100% of the time. I have no alliance to either party. We get too caught up on this R&D all the time. We try to make grandstands for whatever reason, political gain, but that is not the case. It hurts people. It hurts our economy, it hurts our state, and we need to make sure that in all aspects of legislature, we are not playing party politics, and we are keeping the people in mind. And so, since my campaign is issue-driven 100%, I feel like it will be very easy to remind the other senators that there is a reason that they're playing party politics, and that the people need to be remembered and not their donors.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Mr. Baldone?
Yes. When I was in the legislature in 2001, we were not partisan at all. We were the least partisan House in the entire country. During that time, it evolved to a partisan body where it is today. I am committed to bring it back to make sure that both parties work together. During my tenure as state representative, I was appointed to the most important Coastal Advisory Commission by 3 governors. 2 of them were Democrat, two were Republicans, and 1 was a Democrat. All the governors saw that I can work well with both parties. They didn't care what party I was in because they knew I did the right thing every time. It is a mission for me to make sure that we get rid of partisan politics in the Capitol and do what's right for the people.
Thank you, Mr. Baldone. Dr. Babin?
I kind of wish I had a party hat right now because I'd put it on and take it off because what I believe going to the Senate, it's time to take the party hats off and put our shrimp boots on and get to work. Party politics doesn't play well when we're trying to save homes and save lives. We need to work for the people, not the parties. I believe that every problem has a solution, and some problems we need a more liberal, progressive solution to solve that problem. Some problems we need a more conservative solution to solve that problem. And unless we agree to find the right solution for every problem, we'll never solve any problems. We don't go down the bayou when someone's house is flooded and ask what party they are before we help them clean out their house. We just go clean out their house. And I believe that that's what we need to do in the Senate, is work all together to solve problems and to solve problems for the people, all people. And we need to find the right solution for every problem. Sometimes both solutions is important, and it's important to discuss both solutions and come up with something somewhere in the middle. But unless we talk about the solutions and talk about it from all sides, I plan to be open in the Senate. I'm open to all parties' solutions to the problems. On my campaign committee, I have both Democrats, Republicans, and no party people on my committee that are informing me and helping me in this election. And so I plan to continue that in the Senate and have just as many people that I communicate with and solve problems with on the Republican side as well as the Democrat side.
Thank you. Mr. Justclair, what is your position on developing greater incentives for the film entertainment industry to come to Louisiana?
I think we need more auditing, more accountability of the film industry. During my tenure so far, we have uncovered a lot of wrongdoing, the selling of film credits, which I don't favor. You know, if you're going to apply and get film credits, you should go through with the projects that you're applying for and not use it as a tool to make money. The film industry, I think we went overboard with the process, and I think we should limit the amount of credits that we give to the film industry. We were called Hollywood South, but at what cost? And I don't think our return on investment was well worth it. And I'm all for having films made in Louisiana, but at what cost? And I think that there should be a lot more auditing and accountability in the film program.
Thank you. Mr. Swan?
I agree with Mr. Gishclair on the auditing and accountability, but I would like to point out that party politics does play a role in this as well. If a film is deemed too liberal or too conservative, you get an uproar not only by state people in positions of power, but national media will come and make a stink about something that's going on in our state. And so I think that we need to come together as a body, make sure that there is accountability, and ensure that they understand that we aren't just going to leave them out to hang. That if we invite them into our communities, we do so in a way that is mutually beneficial, which naturally we should get more of the benefit since we have the beautiful landscapes to offer and scenery, so on and so forth, and that we need to make sure that we don't leave them out to hang in terms of when their films get released and people are upset. We need to come together and stand with work that is done in our state, regardless of if it upsets some people in certain parties.
Mr. Baldone?
I'm proud to say that I was a co-author with now United States Congressman Steve Scalise on this legislation to create the tax incentive industry to draw an outside resource that we never had before here in Louisiana to that magnitude. By that legislation, we created the film industry it is today in Louisiana. When we give tax incentives, however, though, we have to make sure that Louisiana is getting the proper rate of return on investment. In that initial legislation, some of the numbers we gave were inflated, and so by the time we looked into it, we realized that Louisiana was not getting the return on investment that we were promised. Just like any other incentive that we give any industry, we need to sunset it and evaluate it to make sure that the hard-earned tax dollars that Louisiana is paying for these incentives to attract these industries is a return on investment to Louisiana taxpayers.
Thank you. Dr. Babin?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What is your position on developing greater incentives for the film and entertainment industry to come to Louisiana?
I think before we discuss developing greater incentives to attract more film industry to Louisiana, we have to address why we want the film industry to come here in the first place. And if we want the film industry to come here in the first place to give more people jobs here, then that should be part of the contracts and part of the incentive that we provide to the film industry as we're attracting them to come here. If our purpose for attracting the film industry to come here is to showcase Louisiana, Louisiana's beautiful, and we want to showcase it, then that needs to be part of our driving force in attracting more people here. So if the purpose is to give jobs, then part of the incentive has to be that we provide educated people who have the skills to do the jobs that the film industry needs. For example, we need film producers, we need videographers, we need editors, all of these different skills. Then we need to provide those skills in our workers for the film industry, and that would help attract them here and also provide jobs for our people. If the purpose is to attract the film industry so we showcase our state, then giving them incentives, tax incentives, is no problem because we're getting our bang for our buck because we're getting the marketing that we asked for. So that's the first thing, I think, before we can decide how to attract more film industry here, we have to decide why do we want the film industry to come to Louisiana.
Thank you. Mr. Facey?
Okay, I look at it as a point that over the years I've I've heard different people invest in and get tax credits and stuff to make the movies, and so now you're asking about more incentives. Well, first off, right off the bat, I think the way the incentives were developed, I think we need to take more control on how they work. And I think you need to be able to make people accountable for those incentives and make sure the film actually gets out and does what it does. I don't think the incentive should even count unless the movie or whatever they're putting out for it to help advertise Louisiana, to showcase our area, that they need to make sure that it brought in enough money for these incentives to work. And then we can go ahead and step back and look and figure out more ways to make it better. I think what it is nobody really took this idea and ran with it in the right direction and made sure there was enough accountability in it. Thank you.
Our next question deals with a topic that we've touched upon a little bit earlier this evening. It's going to be directed first to Mr. Swan. What importance do you place on the establishment of a Department of Transportation and Development regional office in the Bayou region as it relates to the completion of I-49 Interstate Corridor project and other projects in our area?
As I previously stated, I would say that is the #1 issue that we can solve to address some of our infrastructure concerns. By doing so, we will no longer be a substation to Orleans Parish, and it will help to ensure that we are not just a footnote. As you know, these roads are failing. Our infrastructure is last in the country. And so the establishment of a Department of Transportation and Development district in our area will allow us to essentially be able to skip a lot of the red tape and get more access to funds, because it'll be equal and separate division just like all the other ones, so that funds will have to be allocated specifically to this district in terms of infrastructure. And so I believe that's the #1 thing that we can do to fight for, to make sure that we are getting the dollars for infrastructure that we need. As you mentioned, we need to make sure that the I-49 corridor is completed for multiple reasons. The economic benefits is the #1, but I would say that, hurricane relief as well, so that whenever these storms come, we have quick and efficient ways to evacuate. And so that would be my very first concern. I would work with administrations on all levels to make sure that they understand the concern, and that the 100-something thousand people of our district are tired of being a substation in Orleans Parish. Like I said earlier, we have the population to have this, but politicians are in there playing party politics, and we can't seem to get it done. So,
Mr. Baldone.
Having a district for the DOTD for Terrebonne Lafourche is a high priority of mine. I think it can cut through the red tape. It can get us our projects quicker. We will have more control and more say-so over our own destination, as opposed to being the stepchild of Orleans Parish and Jefferson Parish. So it's high priority. But even if we can't make that accomplished, we still have to go fight for our money for roads and bridges. I think during my tenure in the legislature, even though we were still a sub-district, we tried that before. It was very difficult to do, because you have an extra cost. Once you do that, you have a district cost, you have more staff, you have more people. So it's not as easy as people think it is, and even though we would like it, it's something I'm going to fight for, but I'll make sure that we don't get penalized by having our own district, by them saying, all right, well, now you have to have your own support staff, and they're going to take that away from your budget, and we have less money to put towards projects. So the #1 money is to make sure, the #1 goal is to make sure we get the maximized dollars that we can for our projects, and make sure that our own DOTD district is not going to cause us to lose money.
Dr. Babin.
So the DOTD district for this area is extremely important, but not only so that we can make sure we secure dollars for this area, but we need focus on this area. For example, the state has this new thing called Complete Streets, and it's been a project for a while now. And we're just in October 18th, we're going to do a demonstration of the Complete Streets downtown. But we've been neglected in Houma and Thibodaux areas with this whole Complete Streets project. By having our own DOTD here, in this area, then the focus can be on this area for not only for dollars, for infrastructure, for roads, but also for way of life and quality of life, putting in bike lanes and putting in crosswalks where they're needed. New Orleans Boulevard has no crosswalks on that street at all. And you know, it's a major highway that it's very difficult, and it's a state highway. There's no handicap accessibility on the sidewalks on that street. I have to have handicap accessibility to get to my business, but the state doesn't have to have handicapped accessibility on the sidewalks to get to mine. So if we had our local DOTD, those situations, that focus could be on our downtowns, both in Houma and in Thibodaux, and we can have more of those quality of life things implemented here, as well as improvement in our infrastructure, our bridges and our roads and those things.
Mr. Facey.
I think having our own district is very important, but I think the biggest thing and the problem with everything is that the whole DOT system needs to be relooked at and rearranged throughout the state to give more funds in the locations needed. A lot of the areas are getting a lot of funds that's going into you know, just like in the Baton Rouge area and stuff like that. I see a lot of things going on. It didn't look like their roads are half as bad as ours, and they're already getting replaced. So I'd love to see our own district, but at the same time, somebody needs to be at this. As a senator, I'll be up there fighting and making sure we straighten out all of the DOT. Thank you.
Mr. Gisclair.
Thank you. Our biggest issue is the land that we live on. If you're in Ruston, your road beds will last a long, long time compared to what we have. The added pressures of these 18-wheelers with pipe and modular devices going offshore, the weights. We do have weights and measures that monitor our big loads, but the added pressure going to the different ports is putting a lot more wear and tear on our roads. We don't have the road beds that Central Louisiana and North Louisiana has. So the maintenance levels are going to be constant. They're going to be higher. The dollars are going to be needed much more in this area, and we're going to need somebody that's going to have to fight and know what they're fighting for. You know, I hear a lot about the towns, Thibodaux, but there are a lot of rural areas in these highways, I-49 corridor. Once it passes by Lafourche, we're going to have a big issue to keep the interstate standards. You have to have service lanes. You're going to have an elevated highway going through Paradis, and that's outside of our district. But that's part of Louisiana. I'm part of Louisiana, and I'm going to work for Louisiana. So we've got some big issues. District 2 is one of the biggest transportation districts. I serve on transportation. I'm on my 12th year. I've gone around the state 12 times with a mandated road show, and I know the road problems, the issues that are faced all over the state. People don't realize how many bridges we have. I'm talking about not only lift bridges or overpasses. There's probably 400 bridges between Lafourche and Terrebonne Parish, over 400 bridges. And, you know, we built these bridges to last 40 and 50 years. The problem is they were built 60 and 70 years ago. So we've got a lot of maintenance ahead of us, and it takes a lot of money, believe me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gisclair. Next question's for Mr. Baldone. It's a two-part question. I'll be more than happy to read it twice for anyone who needs it. First, do you support a constitutional convention to change the nature of the governor's power or the current tax structure of the state? And secondly, if so, what do you believe are the most important issues to address in such a constitutional convention? And how will you work to support a constitutional convention? So sorry, there's three.
Okay. First, would I support a constitutional convention? Absolutely, yes. As a state legislature for those 3 terms, I think in 4 or maybe 5 of those years, I filed a bill to form a constitutional convention. I recognized at that time that our Constitution is very cumbersome. It does not treat all taxpayers equally. There are many tax incentives and tax breaks for industries and people that are not given to other industries and other people. So yes, I support the question. The tax. What is the second part of the question?
If so, what do you believe are most important issues you'd like to address? And then the last one is, will you support a constitutional convention?
Yes, okay. Some of the most important things to address is, again, to stabilize the funding. Right now, we have so many dedications in our Constitution that when we do have a budget crisis, the only things we can cut are 2 things we don't want to cut: healthcare and higher education. The reason we have to cut that is because everything else has been dedicated. It puts the legislature in a trick bag that they can't solve a problem with only maybe 20 or 30% of the budget that they have to play with to solve a problem for 100% of the budget. So yes, I'd support a constitutional convention. I have in the past for 4 or 5 times I've introduced the bill. I think the momentum now is gaining, and I think there's a likelihood that we can have a constitutional convention, and I will be at the lead of that movement.
Thank you, Ms. Baldone. Dr. Babin, would you like me to repeat?
Yes, please.
Sure. I understand. Do you support a constitutional convention to change the nature of the governor's power or the current tax structure of the state? 1. 2, if so, what do you believe are the most important issues to address in such a constitutional convention? And how will you work to support a constitutional convention?
I do support a constitutional convention. Repeat the first question again.
Do you support a constitutional convention to change the nature of the governor's power or the current tax structure of the state?
Okay. So yes, I do support a constitutional convention. The main reason for that support would be because of how cumbersome the Constitution has grown. It is very inequitable as far as the tax structure is concerned. There are like thousands of amendments to the Constitution. And so, yes, I would support restructuring the Constitution, restructuring those amendments, either wrapping them into the Constitution or just stripping them out. And basically, the primary goal behind a constitutional convention would be to streamline the Constitution back to where it's just the Constitution, and the other things that have been amended to the Constitution that don't need to be amended to it would be done in policy and laws later.
Thank you, Dr. Babin. Mr. Facey, would you like me to repeat?
I'll try to work with it without.
Sure.
Yes, I do support a constitutional convention. The thing is we got to be very, very careful on how we initiate a constitutional convention, because if things get going in the wrong direction, it can hurt us more than it can help us. The key is making sure we have the right people in office, such as myself, and not all these regular politicians. We need to go ahead and get new blood in there and go ahead and get things going in the right direction, because the way they did it all these years is the only way you can cut the budget is through education and health care, knowing that none of us want to do that. So the whole problem is with the dedicated funds, and we need to get in there, tear the thing apart with the dedicated funds, and come back and make some good business sense, common sense, to put our Constitution back together and making sure that we can provide for the state of Louisiana the way we need to, instead of playing all these games by just saying the only thing you can cut is health care, the only thing you can cut is schools, because mainly that's the thing we need. So why would anybody, with all these years, have that the only thing you can cut? So I am not a politician. My donors don't control me. I'm a self-made man, and I'll get up there and do the right thing for the right reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gisclair?
I'm going to try without...
I can if you want me.
No, that's all
Okay.
right. It's been 45 years, 1974, I believe, the last Constitutional Convention. I do support it. We have to undedicate all the dedicated funds that are in place. One of the biggest obstacles that I've experienced of individuals trying to create a passing a bill to start and have a constitutional convention is the members. Who's going to be on the members of the convention? And that's been, I guess, a thorn in the side of everyone. Everybody wants to participate, but not everyone can. And I think we need to get our best and brightest from our universities and our best and brightest from some of our parish leaders. And again, with the legislature, selected individuals in the legislature to have the right membership in order to come up with a convention that's going to give us some great results. Now, taking and undedicating these funds that people have had locked in for decades is going to be very difficult. But why is higher ed and healthcare the two unprotected entities in the state? And they're always the target every time we have a budget crisis. So I would be in favor of a constitutional convention, but I want to make sure that higher ed and healthcare has some protection. TOPS. Every year it's a battle to fully fund TOPS. And again, TOPS needs to be reworked. But again, constitutional convention is sorely needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Swan, would you like me to repeat?
No, I think I understand the scope of the question.
Thank you.
I would like to first point out that Big Mike made a great point. He said that we need someone that is not a politician and that is not beholden to their donors. And I don't know how close we can get to that, except for someone that doesn't have any donors and is making his first campaign run. So I would like to first point out that the reason that we are even in this predicament now, we live in a state with the most constitutional reworks in the history of the country. The reason we're in this is because of party politics. Politicians get in bed with their donors and they give away the basket to everyone. The first thing that I would work to do is make sure that if we do have a constitutional convention, we have to address the industrial tax exemption program, because this program directly steals money from our children. It takes money from schools and gives it away to large corporations that do not need them. And so we need to make sure that we are not giving away our house and home to corporations so that they can just up and leave once the resources are gone. And in terms of the power of the governor, I would say that that does need to be reworked, but we have to make sure that there are state legislators in there that are not just trying to make a power grab. The founding fathers, they created our system for the country in which our state is modeled after, the three-part system in which all branches are co-equal. Now, our state does have an extremely powerful governor in terms of what he can and can't do, and so I feel like that is something that needs to be addressed, but it can't get out of hand playing party politics, just trying to strip important role of government of its power.
Thank you.
All right, this question is for Dr. Babin. With the upcoming census and redistricting, what will you do to secure better representation for our region? And we have a congressional map here.
Just for the record, so you can see, we got this map from South Central Planning. This shows the different congressional districts, and you can see the pizza slices that are all over the place, and how Terrebonne and Lafourche have been sliced up so significantly from the last redistricting. In consideration of that, that's how the question is asked with the upcoming census and redistricting. What action will you take to try to change these lines?
Well, first of all, the redistricting will come in this next term, and so that is something we will be addressing. There are two issues that need to be considered when we talk about the districts and how the lines are drawn. One is representation for the people. And so when you're looking at there is how many people live where. But also you have to look at the similarities between the people. For example, just in this Senate district, Senate 20, or in the Senate districts in the 2 parishes, Terrebonne is represented by 2 Senate districts. Lafourche has 5 different senators. So the people in Lafourche, how can they feel like all of their needs are represented in the Senate when you have so many Senate districts? So by looking at it not only by how many people are in a certain area, but also by what common needs those people have. For example, Lafourche Parish, they're a common entity government-wise. And so as much as possible, those should be kept together. Just like Terrebonne Parish. Terrebonne Parish should be kept together more because of its common needs. Lafourche and Terrebonne are very similar as well. And, though it makes more sense to put Lafourche and Terrebonne together in Senate districts than Terrebonne and St. Mary, for example. So those are some of the issues. I don't think Senate district or any districts should be drawn, congressional districts as well, based on party or based on trying to decide what's best to keep the current senators and congressmen in office. I think it should be based on the needs of the people and the population and where they are.
Thank you. Mr. Facey?
All right. First thing I'll start with is I think we got to get back to common sense, because the way they gerrymander everything, there's no common sense used. And I think that government has lost a lot of things in common sense because they are gerrymandering these districts so certain people get votes. So one of my ideas was, let's bring a third party in that's non-partisan to help with the redistricting, to get some common sense going back into making sure everybody is being handled in the right direction, and not just because of whether they're Republican or Democrat or whatever, because we all need to learn to live together, and once we do that, we'll have a lot better world. Thank you.
Mr. Gisclair?
Hurricane Katrina obviously displaced a couple of 100,000 people from Orleans and Jefferson. There was a big influx into Livingston and East Baton Rouge. Their population just blew up, and that put a big ripple effect going westward to us. And in order to come up with a minority congressional district, I think Cedric Richmond is our congressman. They gerrymandered a district that basically followed the Mississippi River and surrounding parishes, the river parishes. I think the population shift has settled back into New Orleans, and I think because of the rebuilding of New Orleans, that the gerrymandered District 2, I believe it is, can come back and be redrawn and be put back into the city itself like it was before, which would open up and give us, I guess, a broader district in the districts 1, 3, and 6, just looking at it from here. But I think the population shifts that are back almost to normal numbers, we should be able to rework the lines. That'll make a lot more sense.
Mr. Swan?
Repeat the question, please.
With the upcoming census and redistricting, what will you do to secure better representation for our region?
All right. Number one, I would like to point out to the people that the redistricting of our area is the most important task that the state legislature will be taking on in this upcoming term. This is where your children go to school. This is where you vote for president. This is how much power you have politically. And I think that there is no better way to make a stand for the people, by the people, is to send someone that can't be bought by anyone and is not going to play party politics with people's lives. This is people's lives, that people go on that floor and debate, we need to allocate X amount of people here and X amount of people there, and they draw these silly lines all over, and it affects real people. That's the funny part about all of this, is that they seem to not take this seriously, and they would rather be concerned with who stays in power and how they maintain majorities in state legislatures. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that that's not the game that I'm playing. I understand that, like I said, this is where your children go to school, and that for some people is the most important thing to them. A lot of these people move to make sure that they are in a good school district and so on and so forth. And so by gerrymandering and redistricting, it can affect a lot of people's lives and how they get funding for their areas. And so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is the most important thing that is going to be happening in our state. And we need to make sure that we are sending someone that is not playing party politics and is accounting for every person's life, regular or not.
Mr. Baldone?
Yes. First of all, I'm the only candidate up here that has served in 2 reapportionment sessions, 2001 and 2011. Those are very important times for our area because that determines the future for the next 10 years. The congressional districts was a big part of topic when Louisiana was losing a congressional district because of the lack of population growth. We always had Terrebonne-Lafourche as the center of that congressional district. However, due to the loss of population, our district was carved up, and now we have 2 congressmen that represents Terrebonne-Lafourche. My job is to represent the people of Terrebonne-Lafourche and give the best representation as possible. Not what my wishes are, but what the wishes are for the constituents of Terrebonne-Lafourche. So I will consult with the Chamber of Commerce, both in Terrebonne-Lafourche. I will consult with the parish presidents, the councilmen, to see if we want to try to fight to get Terrebonne-Lafourche to be the heart of the district or stay where we are. Let me remind you that we have 2 extremely competent, extremely important congressmen. Congressman Steve Scalise, the minority whip, and Garrett Graves. Even though Steve is from New Orleans and Garrett's from Baton Rouge, I guarantee you they fight tooth and nail for Terrebonne-Lafourche parishes. I've known both of them for over 20 years. I've served with Steve, and I worked very closely with Garrett when he was in when he was a congressman, as well as when he was Representative Tozan's office. Even though ideally we'd love to have our own seat right now, I'm not sure if I want to give up Steve Scalise or Garrett Graves. There are 2 superstars that I think will be around. They're young enough. They'll be around for the next 10 years. So. But we will debate this topic to see what we decide to do. But my inclination is to probably keep it where it is. Also, when you're reapportioning congressional seats, it has to be by exact number. When you do a state house, a state rep, we have about a 5% margin of error. You don't for Congress. It has to be almost to the person. So it's very difficult to draw the lines to get that exact number. And that's a lot of times why these things look the way they do, because you have to abide by the Constitution and make sure that everybody gets the same representation.
The next question will be directed to Mr. Facey. What, if any, tax reforms would you support at the state level?
At the state level, I would love to see us get our sales tax back into order to be competitive with the rest of the states. Also, we have what we call a franchise tax on industry that wants to move here, but the franchise tax is on how much money you borrow and owe. So you put a detriment on a new company or a company that's wanting to expand at the same time. So we need to totally go in and revitalize and try to do away with the franchise tax. Some of the states have already done that, which makes them more competitive than us on building and increasing our business. My business is a lot with heavy equipment, and that's a high cost. You always having to pay for equipment that runs $400,000 or $500,000 a piece. And one of the things that you have a 10% sales tax. now that's, 9.25 to 10%. I just round it off because if I buy a $500,000 piece of equipment, that's a bunch of extra tax to pay than we do in other states. So I think what we need to do is just go back and go through our whole tax code and start revamping it so we can make it more industry friendly. And then if we do that, we create jobs. Jobs create jobs, and on down the line. And so we need to do a lot on restructuring our tax base. And also, what I'd like to do is what I've always said is we always. I guess on that question, we always don't have any incentives for the hard-working American, the person that works hard all the time. I'd love to see income tax free on overtime. So that guy, the guy that's working all that overtime, instead of increasing his tax costs, how about giving him a break because he's working more than his 40 hours and making his fair share. So I think that would be a big deal if we put no income tax on overtime. And if we can do it in the state, maybe we can get the federal government to do it too. And then that way industry just vitalizes, because then the businesses don't have to match it. And then at the same time, we don't have to, everybody has a lot bigger income to spend money. So I think it would make industry just blossom overnight. Thank you.
Mr. Gisclair.
I'm not a CPA, and I would defer this type of question once in office to the tax experts and create a commission to look at redoing our tax code. The industrial tax exemption program, we have to look at how many exemptions are we giving away. And I think holding companies accountable. They're promising I'm going to establish 1,500 jobs. I get a 10-year exemption. You go audit the company 4 years down the road, and they've only created 250 jobs instead of what they promised. Again, auditing these companies and holding them accountable. I'd be in favor of ramping up a 10-year exemption. You may get your first 2 years tax-free, but the local school boards are suffering, and I think they need to get repaid by making these companies on the third year maybe pay 10%, then 20%, and ramp it up to 100% at the end of 10 years. They're going to get an exemption, but it's going to be a sliding scale instead of a free ride for 10 years. And then sometimes going to another state like some companies do.
Mr. Swan.
I would say that the number one tax that I would aim to address, our previous legislator had made an attempt to get through a tax that would eliminate all sales tax on women's feminine products. I believe that that is something that's very important because that affects regular people in all walks of life. It allows them to save an enormous amount of money every year. As men, we have no way to understand what women go through and how they have to spend all of this money that essentially shouldn't even be spent. This could add up to hundreds of dollars a year that we're putting directly into the pockets of people. The second tax I would look into is the industrial tax exemption. For some of these companies, we're giving them 85% tax exemptions, 90% tax exemptions, 60% tax exemptions. These are all large numbers that regular people in no way, shape, or form could ever see, even though we have our homestead tax exemptions. And so we need to make sure that our corporate citizens are respected, but at the same time, they're paying their fair share because we all pay our fair share. By doing that, we will no longer be stealing money from our schools, and we'll make sure that we can bolster our education and ensure that our students have the talent that is required to not only keep those companies so they don't mind paying a little more money, but attract new companies with our diverse workforce.
Mr. Baldone.
The Public Affairs Research Council just did a major study on this, and I agree with most of their points. First one is to have a stable and predictable budget. We need that stability so that our higher institutions of learning know their funding source, our healthcare knows their funding source, and infrastructure knows their funding source. We also need to expand our tax base. We do this by evaluating all the tax exemptions that are given now. It is not fair when certain industries get a tax exemption and certain businesses don't. It should be fair whether you employ 2 people or whether you employ 2,000 people. You should have the same benefits that the big corporation gets or that the little corporation gets. We need to sunset every tax exemption. That way, there's a fresh set of eyes looking at it every 5 or 10 years. When an exemption is brought to the legislature, it's with promises of creating jobs and increasing our tax base. A lot of times those promises aren't fulfilled. We need to hold these businesses accountable. We need to make sure that Louisiana's getting a return on its investment, and that by sunsetting these, we can make sure that any incentives that are given to business is honored and they living up to their word. We also need to make a standardized sales tax collection system so businesses don't have the cumbersome process of submitting sales tax to 64 different parishes. We need that one singular location that does a sales tax collection for the rest of the state to streamline that, to save businesses time and effort to report in sales tax reports to various parishes that they do business with. Thank you.
Dr. Babin.
Yes, the tax code needs to be addressed in several ways. We have, personal income tax, and that needs to be addressed to make it equitable among everybody. And then we have the business tax on the other side. And one of the issues, like Mr. Baldone was saying, is that we have so many taxing authorities. Each parish has its own individual sales tax, and that is combined with the state sales tax. And so having a central location to contribute all of that to, so people who operate in different parishes don't have to go and pay their taxes in all the different parishes, will help streamline that, and will save businesses money as well. Also, we need to tie taxes to what they are for. It's kind of like having a planned budget, just like your household. You have your income, you have your budget, you figure out where it's going to go. But we have these industrial tax credits that we've given to these businesses. In fact, the state gave industrial tax credits, and they were giving away taxes for local governments. It's the local governments that levy those taxes. So the governor recently moved that to where the local taxing authority makes the decision about whether or not to give the tax exemption or not. And that's where it should be. The taxing authority is the one who should determine whether or not those exemptions happen. And that being said, the tax exemption, for example, for property tax for schools, we give a portion of our property taxes, a millage, that goes to the school system. And so when the school system is the taxing authority and they make the decision about whether or not to give that company an exemption for that tax, they're in control of it. And so we need to streamline all of that so that what they're being taxed for is what those taxes are being used for.
Thank you. Mr. Gisclair? In response to complaints of government waste, where would you propose cutting expenditures in the state budget?
Oh, that's a big question. Where would I propose cutting expenditures? Well, in the Department of Health, I think they're budgeted $12 billion a year, and there's approximately $1 billion of fraud that's taking place. The problem that they're having is not having enough inspectors, individuals checking on the different healthcare companies that are defrauding the state of Louisiana to the tune of $1 billion. And it's a big number, but it's an actual number that Dr. G she's trying her best with the limited number of personnel. I mean, I would bolster the auditing and inspections of these, I'm going to say, home health companies and medical facilities that are abusing the system. And I would definitely penalize them pretty heavy instead of losing $1 billion a year. That could be put to use in a lot better places in our state.
Thank you. Mr. Swan?
Repeat the question, please.
Sure. In response to complaints of government waste, where would you propose cutting expenditures in the state budget?
Healthcare and education. No, I'm just playing. But no, on a serious note, we have to make sure that we eliminate a lot of the fraud that exists, and especially in these agencies, there's a lot of redundancy. We need to make sure and that we go through and essentially ask every person, what is your job? And then when we have a clear, comprehensive job description for a lot of these workers in these agencies, we can ensure that we can eliminate these redundancies, that you don't have to go to 2 separate people to get a permit through just because those 2 people have a little bit of power and they can control that permit. I think that one of the main aspects that we can aim to make cuts, which a lot of politicians are not going to tell you where they're going to make cuts. That's a really hard question to answer. But one of the main things that we could aim at is just our, especially as a state legislator, our frivolous waste, how much paper we use, things of that nature. How many trips are we taking? Are these trips as important as they really are these trips as important as we are making them out to be? So I believe that government expenditures, direct government expenditures, is one of the biggest ways that we can make a solid dent in the budget, because it gives each department a way to sort of self-analyze and make sure that they are running in the most efficient way as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Mr. Baldone?
Tracking down government waste it's a moving target. It changes constantly. It has to be something that's monitored. Make sure you monitor all departments. Make sure that there was no waste going on in each department. With a $30 billion business, which the state of Louisiana is, there's always going to be room to remove duplication of services and cut down on some waste. Another way is, again, getting back to the Constitutional Convention. If we have a Constitutional Convention and we have a budget shortfall, we're able to spread the cuts over all departments instead of certain departments like higher education and healthcare. When you spread the cuts out to everybody, they'll get rid of their own waste, because they're going to keep the programs that they need and make the cuts where they know, and have the directors know where the best places are to cut the waste for their department.
Thank you. Dr. Babin?
Well, I think every department has some amount of waste, not just the healthcare, but every single department. And I think by challenging departments and giving the departments themselves incentives to cut the waste within those departments, then we could eliminate the wasteful spending in some departments. Some of the, just like in the ODD, some of the spending that just the contractors spend on an everyday basis is wasteful, and that could be cut. But we need to provide some kinds of incentives to encourage them to cut that, instead of also hiring our own people for projects instead of hiring out of state for projects. Helps bring that money back, and then those dollars go back into the state budget. So that's wasteful when we sending our dollars out of state for projects.
Thank you. Mr. Facey?
Okay, number one, like Jerry said, fraud in the Medicaid and the Medicare industry and all that. We need to get a handle on that. I think it's a very complicated issue to where we need an outsider coming in and sinking their teeth into it to get it right, which I am. For some reason, it's been going on for years and years, and it hasn't been fixed yet, so I think they need a little help. repetitive jobs. We got a lot of jobs we could consolidate. We could go through each department, start consolidating jobs to make sure that we don't have duplication. Even in my business of 500 personnel or so, we find that over a period of time, we start duplicating certain things that we need to audit on a regular basis. I don't think it's audited enough to go through these departments and make sure we can keep everybody doing something. A lot of stuff is repetitive. Also, similar to the wildlife and fisheries, I look at the wildlife fisheries. Wildlife and fisheries, a lot of self-sustain. They provide a lot of their own income through hunting license and a lot of other things. We need to look at some of our other programs to see if we can come up with ways to do that, to where they have incentives to help providing for themselves. Wildlife and fisheries does a really good job maintaining that. One of the things I found out by working down on the Mississippi River is that every yard of sand that's dredged out of the Mississippi, Wildlife and Fisheries gets 25 cents a yard from industry. So I think we need to start putting and be innovative on things like that to get the government, working with industry to make things a lot better for everybody and going through all these departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swan, we'll start with you. What areas of improving and expansion of economic development would you promote? And what specific legislation would you introduce to improve the economic development to the region?
It's a good question. The number one thing I would do, like I mentioned earlier, I would try to develop a campaign that we could get most of the other senators around. It would be called something along the lines of Go Louisiana, in which we bolster our ability to absorb retirees from around the country and provide them with a way of life that is uncomparable to many places in terms of our hunting availability, our fishing. So with that, infrastructure projects, like I mentioned earlier, bike lanes to revitalize our downtown area, and making sure that we get with the local economic planning boards to ensure that they are helping these businesses to be closer together. Often in times you'll see businesses fail because they are so far from the center of commerce, and that is one of the hardest challenges of starting a small business in our area, is that we essentially have no center of commerce. And so I believe that with the Go Louisiana campaign, we can tie money into recreation, and those recreational funds will be able to help citizens from all walks of life, from children to retirees. And through the recreation and infrastructure campaign Go Louisiana, that would also be able to give us an opportunity to fight for funding for the sports complex that is coming up on 311. I believe that this is one of the major projects that needs to be accomplished in our area, and we need someone that's going to fight for the funding for this project. The sports complex would, just in and of itself, would allow for many sports tournaments, various people coming in to use our hotels and to use our restaurants, and essentially bring foreign dollars in terms of our district into our district. So the Go Louisiana campaign that I aim to develop is going to be centered around bolstering infrastructure that revitalizes downtowns by supplying funds to create new innovative projects like bike lanes, and to make sure that we partner recreation with that, because it goes hand in hand. If we're going to create new recreational opportunities, we need to make sure that the funds are available to accommodate these either structures or projects that need to be accomplished.
Thank you. Mr. Baldone?
Yes. Government's job is to give the private sector the tools to create the jobs. Those tools are an educated workforce, infrastructure, and incentives. We desperately need to invest in Nichols and in Fletcher. They are the driving force that educates our workforce. We also need to expand the high school training for individuals who want to enter a trade prior to leaving high school, so that they are able to enter the workforce with a good educational training. Infrastructure. We need to provide the correct infrastructure. Economic development. If we invest in the Port of New Orleans or the Port of Fouchon, we know that every dollar we invest in ports, we get a $7 return on investment. That's a phenomenal return. I would make that investment privately every day if I could, privately, if I can invest $1 and know I'm going to get $7 on the back end. So we have to make sure that we use our tax dollars wisely. We invest in infrastructure. We invest in our people, most importantly. Our people are the number one way to increase our economic development is by educating our workforce and make sure that we get a return on investment. In the Terrebonne and Lafourche area specifically, I think we can do that by, again, promoting the LNG facilities. That's the future coming, to make sure that we have good infrastructure for those companies that are building LNG facilities here. And we also need to work on tourism. Tourism is one of the number one industries in the state. We need to promote that for Terrebonne and Lafourche because we have a culture in Terrebonne and Lafourche that nowhere else in the world has. And by doing that, that will create economic development.
Thank you. Dr. Babbitt?
Well, first thing we need to do is strengthen the industries we already have here. We have the seafood industry and we have oil and gas industry. The seafood industry, we recently, in fact, Mr. Gisclair recently authored the bill to have the on the menu the origin of your seafood listed. But they're already finding loopholes for that, and that bill will need to be that will need to be addressed very soon so that we can continue to strengthen our seafood industry here. There are other issues with the influx of imported shrimp and other imported seafoods that we need to address in order to strengthen our own seafood industry and help them out. The seafood industry is more than just the shrimpers and fishermen going out and collecting shrimp. There's all of the service industry that services this industry as well that we need to help and support. When the shrimpers come and they dock, they have to go grocery shopping, and so our grocery stores are supporting the shrimpers as well. And so we need to keep promoting those and strengthen those jobs to strengthen that industry. It's oil and gas. We need to provide the infrastructure for them to keep them strong and keep that industry moving and going as well. We also need to provide incentives for innovation. Our oil and gas support services have all kinds of inventions and things that not only support the oil and gas industry, but can be applied to other fields as well. Elevating Boats Incorporated have lift boats, and they not only serve the oil and gas industry, but they actually had a lift boat recently off the coast of Florida implementing artificial reefs. And so if we could provide incentives for these kinds of innovations to take the service industry that supports the oil and gas and move them to do other things as well. We have a very intelligent, smart people here, and they are very innovative, and we need to promote that and support that through incentives and that kind of thing.
Thank you. Mr. Facey?
Okay, I got a number of items I want to hit on. What I look at is Terrebonne and Lafourche Parish as a whole is all of the Bayou region. All our bayous, I know that Lafourche is working on Bayou Lafourche, getting it in better shape and getting in tourists and stuff more involved. But what we need to do is I work all around the country, so I look at like San Antonio went in, made their riverfront, made things vital to bring in tourists, and it's really a lovely place. And I look at Bayou Terrebonne and the things we could have done to enhance it, and I look around and what I've watched over the years, we're tearing out bridges and putting in culverts, making it just a drainage ditch. We've really damaged a lot of our industry over the years that I watched happen. And every time we pulled out a bridge and put in a culvert, I said, well, the boat's never going to pass there again, because I look at San Antonio, all the little boats run around, the tourists come, and it brings in people. So all of those things, we could go back and start looking at all that instead of tearing our bridges down and putting in culverts and just making our bayous just a big ditch, a drainage ditch. We need to look at moving things around and getting, just think if waterfront property is more expensive and more valuable than anything. People love to live on the water. They love to have a boat behind their house and jump in it and go. So we need to look at all those kind of things. One of the biggest things I always looked at, I live on the intercoastal. I watch the tugboats pass all the time, pushing these big barges and everything. And I just think, boy, if we could just reroute those barges in a little different direction and make the intercoastal a vital waterway for recreation, it would change the game for Louisiana and Lafourche, for Terrebonne and Lafourche. The next thing is the seafood industry. The seafood industry, all our down the bayous are deteriorating, falling apart. All these people in the commercial fishing industry are fighting very hard just to keep their little piece of land to have a dock. We need to go down there and give them some help and get them on the right track and give them some ability to get things going in the right direction. Also, I look at Louisiana as the heartbeat of America. I'm in the pipeline business. We feed all the rest of the country. Our pipelines that flow through our industry and through our parish feeds a lot of the country. So we have a lot of infrastructure work to do there with our land erosion and everything. All these pipelines exposed, and we got a lot of work to do to get the wetlands back so we can save our pipelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gisclair?
The question is you said job creations?
Expansion of economic development and improving.
What I would like to see is take some of our shipbuilding capacities that are no longer building vessels and try to get into modular construction, whether it be modular generators, pumps that are being used offshore, convert all our shipyards, not all of them, but get our shipyards going in a different direction. Instead of the traditional shipbuilding, get into fabrication of modules that can be shipped anywhere in the world. We have the best welders in the world. I was instrumental in facilitating an agreement with South Lafourche High School and Miss Christine Strickland with Fletcher, getting a welding and diesel mechanic class. Students that are not going to college, they're transferring and working, I believe, the magnet school outside of Lockport. And we're training a workforce that are not college bound, that are going to be in the field immediately. With the LNG facility coming, they're going to need all sorts of construction people. And I think we're going to have the individuals that are going to be there when we're servicing the deepwater oil service facilities at Port Fourchon and Port of Terrebonne. We're going to have the workforce available. And I think that's going to help our economy and help our people.
Candidates, it is now time 7:46. That will be our last question. As we discussed earlier, I'll give you time for closing comments. We will start with Mr. Swan. Please take 2 minutes. Closing comments, discuss anything you would like to discuss.
I just want to start off by pointing out that I am the only candidate that is not taking any contributions from any donors, and this is because I cannot be bought. I understand where I come from, and that if I'm your senator, I have to go and fight for the people every day. And so therefore, I want to make sure that we are running a campaign on issues for the people, by the people, for the people, by the people, and that there are no conflicts of interest. I also want to point out that we are last nationally, and that politicians have failed us. They play politics on a consistent basis, and I don't understand how we can expect a change if we continue to do the same thing. And so therefore, I ask everyone's support. If you enjoy these messages, if you enjoy my ideas, and you want to hear more, you can follow me on Facebook at Shane Swan for State Senate District 20. Here, I use the platform to communicate with the people directly, most of the time throughout the day, in between going out and meeting people individually. And this is the easiest way for you to contribute to our fight and contribute to our cause. Like I said, I'm not taking any contributions. And so please, I ask you to invite all your friends and family to like our campaign page. That's Shane Swan for State Senate District 20. That's the easiest way to stay in the game fighting and not have to worry about our donors, because every day we're talking to people about their problems. And those problems, like I stated earlier, we're going to keep it simple. We're focusing on classrooms, roads, and jobs. Classrooms, because we need to provide businesses with the talent to fill their jobs, and roads, because we need to provide companies with roads to conduct their businesses on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Mr. Damon Baldone?
I want you to imagine, whatever profession you're in, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a welder, pipe fitter, nurse, that you went to school for that profession, you studied that profession, you worked at that profession for 30 years, you were extremely good at that profession, you received awards for that profession, and then you're applying for a job with people who are good people, but they don't have the qualifications that you have. Would you expect to get the job if somebody has 0 qualifications? Let's look on the other side. What if you're a boss and you had to only hire 1 employee, and that employee has to run your business, and if he doesn't succeed, then your business fails? Would you hire somebody that has 30 years experience, that's done the job before, that went to school for it, that taught that business, that taught that field, that worked in that field, that succeeded in that field, and proven success? Or would you hire somebody that has 0 experience, that has 0 education towards it, and 0 success in that field? Terrebonne and Lafourche has 1 senator. 250,000 people have 1 senator from this parish. This is the most important seat that this Terrebonne and Lafourche has with the state of Louisiana. I think it's important that we hire the most qualified person for that job, and I like to say that I think I am the most qualified person for that job. I worked hard. I'm a good, honest guy. I've done a great job as a representative, and I will continue to do a great job as your next state senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldone. Dr. Brenda Babin?
Well, again, I'm Dr. Brenda Babin, and I'm running because I have faith in our people, hope for our future, and I love Louisiana and the Bayou region. As a coastal scientist, I will continue to bring funds to this area to preserve our coast, to build our levees, and to make decisions to do that based on science and not on politics. As an educator, I will return respect to the classroom through legislation that not only respects our teachers, but also our students and our schools. And I would like to bring the soul back into education. I love Louisiana and the Bayou region. I want to preserve our culture, and I want to preserve our way of life. I will make decisions based on my conservative Catholic values to do just that. On October 12th, vote Dr. Brenda LaRue Babin, Babin for the Bayou. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Babin. Mr. Mike Facey?
Okay, I'll start with, I'm Mike Facey, known as Big Mike. And I have a list of things I want to go to the state and do instead of all this, I'm just going to give you the list. I'm all about jobs. I want to go and get jobs. Education and training is most important. Flood protection and saving our coast. To make Louisiana the state of opportunity, the heartbeat of America. Education and training, job creation, and career building. Just at our own building right now, we've set up and teamed up with Fletcher to do industrial training to make more jobs available and train people so we can get the right people with what they need to do. Deregulate the red tape that makes things business friendly. We need to fight the legacy lawsuit. None of these up here has talked about the legacy lawsuit but me. The legacy lawsuit would kill this whole parish and Lafourche Parish. So we need to do that. We need to reduce the wasteful dedicated funds. We need to improve the quality of life for our lower income and elderly and give them more opportunities. We need to help the state universities become more financially stable. We also need to help the commercial fishermen. Like I said earlier, we need to give all of those commercial fishermen a good helping hand down our bayous in both Lafourche and Terrebonne to make it easier for them to make a living because they have a hard time. I know what it is to buy diesel. I know what it is to make a living. I understand. I've been in the construction business for 40 years. I know how to build many things. And what we need in the state legislature as a senator is to be able to have someone who knows how to build things. And I know how to do that. I know how to compromise. I want y'all to remember Mike Fazy, Big Mike Fazy, number 58 for State Senate, District 20. And I want to thank y'all all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fazy. Mr. Truck, Gisclair?
I'm Jerry Truck Gisclair, married to Linda, proud parents of 3 daughters. I lost a daughter a month ago. I'm sorry. But that being said, she lost a battle with cancer. Sorry for being emotional. I served my country in the Vietnam War from 67 to 71. People paid the ultimate price for us to have this freedom over here. Please exercise your right to vote. I've got almost 12 years' experience in the House of Representatives. I do take donations from different lobbying groups. My daughter is my treasurer, and she does not tell me who sends me a check. So I don't owe anyone, and I don't feel like I owe anyone a vote. I cannot be bought. I will not be bought. Our fishermen, I spoke to 12 shrimpers last night with a candidate for Agriculture Commissioner. I was speaking to the last generation of shrimpers. We're going to lose that culture if we don't do anything to change what's going on right now. The prices that they're getting are ridiculous. We need to support our shrimping industry. I'm going to wrap it up real quick. October 12th, vote for the right person, number 59. That's me. If you don't vote for me, please vote for one of these individuals. Exercise your right to vote. Bien merci.
Thank you, Mr. Gisclair. Candidates, thank you for participating in the forum tonight. Panelists, thank you for taking your time for volunteering tonight. I'd like to thank the Chamber staff and our Board of Directors for their participation in the forum, and a special thank you to Dr. Christine Strickland and her staff for allowing us the use of her beautiful facility and setting it up for us. The Houma Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce would like to thank everyone for attending tonight's forum. Please join us Monday, August 26th for our forum featuring the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Race. Have a good night and be safe. Go on to your next destination.